Julia, my wife, stood across from me, arms crossed tightly against her chest, her posture rigid and commanding. The tension in the air was palpable, and her voice shattered the silence like glass. Filled with rage that felt as if it could explode at any moment. I won't say it again. David needs assistance, and you are being completely self-centered. The heat of her words hung in the room, and I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. Julia, please set down your coffee cup. We've discussed this before. It's not about being selfish. It's about priorities. David has grown too dependent on us, and it's time he takes responsibility for his actions. The frustration was evident in Julia's tight lips, pressed together in a thin line. Her anger was palpable, almost tangible. He's my brother, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut. We're family. We promised to support each other when we got married. I replied, my tone steady. Yes, but family members also need to learn to stand on their own. I wasn't trying to escalate the argument. I simply believed it was time for David to face his problems without dragging us down with him. We had rescued him from more crises than I could count, and it was becoming exhausting. Julia abruptly pulled out a chair with a screech, sitting down with a force that echoed in the room. Her piercing gaze was fixed on me, her expression as hard as stone. You don't understand, do you? She whispered, her voice low and trembling with restrained fury. You can't comprehend what it's like to support someone because you don't have siblings. Although her words stung, I remained composed and replied, not having siblings doesn't mean I lack an understanding of accountability. Right now, my focus is on our future and our finances. I cannot keep giving when it's clear David is unwilling to change. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I could sense her anger simmering just beneath the surface as she gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles white with tension. Suddenly, in a fit of frustration, she reached for a coffee cup and hurled its contents at me. Time seemed to slow as a dark liquid arched through the air, splattering against my skin with a searing heat. I gasped in shock, more impacted by the sound of the mug clattering against the table than the discomfort itself. For a moment, I sat in stunned silence, my face burning, my shirt soaked, and my hands trembling as I reached for a tissue to wipe away the stinging liquid. Julia remained motionless, her expression a turbulent mix of rage and a fleeting hint of regret. Her lips parted as if she wanted to say something, but remained silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on us. Finally, I broke the stillness, my voice low but firm. What the hell, Julia? Although I didn't raise my voice, the incredulity behind it was more powerful than if I had yelled. You would have pushed me, she retorted defensively, though there was a tremor in her tone that hinted at her internal conflict. I stood slowly, my heart pounding. You were furious, and you meant every word. This, I gestured to my drenched shirt, is about control, not just David. It's about your belief that you can manipulate me into doing what you want, regardless of the consequences for us. Julia's expression hardened again, the moment of hesitation gone, as if she had steeled herself against the truth. You're being dramatic, she dismissed, waving her hand as if to brush away my concerns. It's just coffee. I interrupted her, realizing the severity of her actions. Just coffee, I exclaimed, feeling the gravity of the situation settle around us. For the first time, I noticed a shift in her demeanor, not one of remorse, but a defiance. Don't you dare belittle this. If you had just agreed to help David, none of this would have happened. This is your fault, Mark. As I gazed at her, my thoughts raced. Was this who she had always been? Had I ignored the warning signs of stress and passion, or had things changed so gradually that I hadn't noticed until now? I think we're done here, I finally stated, not waiting for a response. I need some air. As I left the kitchen, the morning light that had once felt welcoming now seemed oppressive. One thought echoed in my mind as I made my way to the bathroom to wash the coffee off my face, a terrible caricature of what my life should have been. Staring into the mirror, my face still tingling from the burn, I let cold water run over my skin. The redness was a stark reminder of what had just occurred. Turning off the faucet, I came to a sobering realization. Something fundamental in my marriage had broken, possibly beyond repair. I leaned heavily on the sink, water trickling down my chin, my reflection looking back at me with exhaustion and dark circles under my eyes that hadn't been there a few years ago. When had Julia become someone who could throw coffee at me during a disagreement? More disturbingly, when had I stopped recognizing the woman I married? I reassured myself, just because couples fight, Mark, doesn't mean you should give up. But this was not just about fighting. It was years of me sacrificing my own needs and boundaries while she continued to take, without giving anything in return. Suddenly, Julia jumped up, scraping her chair against the floor. What exactly have you sacrificed, Mark? As far as I can see, you've done nothing but win every time I've asked for help. I retorted, my voice rising slightly. It's unbelievable that you would throw coffee in my face while pleading for assistance. Julia's demeanor shifted. Her cheeks flushed as she realized her mistake. I was upset, but I didn't realize that was the issue. I replied, my voice steady but firm. You never consider the fallout, and I'm always the one left to deal with it. My words hung heavily in the air, and neither of us spoke for a moment, the silence stretching longer than comfortable. Then Julia moved closer, her voice trembling with rage and hurt. So what are you saying, Mark? That you're finished and just leaving? I looked into her eyes, my heart racing. That's exactly what I'm saying. A look of disbelief crossed her face. You're serious? I am. I confirmed, the words both liberating and painful to utter. I can't do this any longer. I need to start prioritizing myself. She turned away, her shoulders slumping as if she wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. The finality of my decision hit me, like a punch to the gut. Yet I pressed on, grabbing my keys from the desk and heading for the door. I'll be in touch regarding the details, I said, mentally preparing to consult my lawyer as I left. As the door closed softly behind me, I felt a constriction in my chest, but for the first time in years, I could breathe. I was uncertain about what lay ahead, but I knew I wouldn't be returning to that house. The stress of the encounter with Julia lingered, leaving me drained yet oddly liberated. The path forward was unclear, but at least I could now find my way. For years, I had been extinguishing fires in a marriage that had run on autopilot. Today marked the first day of my recovery. My mind raced with everything that needed attention: the house, finances, and legal matters. I parked in Ryan's driveway, but it struck me that this place no longer felt like home. Before I could knock, Ryan answered the door, his expression cautious. Well, he asked, sensing the way of the moment. It's done, I replied as I stepped inside, exhaling deeply, finally acknowledging the reality that it was over. Ryan whistled softly, the sound echoing in the quiet room. How did she react? I shrugged, feeling a mix of relief and uncertainty. As expected, some shouting, guilt-tripping, but she didn't resist as fiercely as I thought. I think she knew this was coming. He nodded, handed me a cold bottle of water. That's the first step. The hard part comes next. I took a deep sip, the coolness refreshing against my dry throat, knowing he was right. You need to make plans, financial and legal. Ensure she doesn't blindside you later. I nodded, realizing the importance of being prepared. You have joint accounts, right? He asked, his tone serious. Most of our funds are my name, I replied, feeling a flicker of anxiety. Then transfer them. Protect yourself. She doesn't work, right? Deactivate her credit card access and set up a new account for your direct deposits. You need to make sure she can't rack up debt in your name. I frowned, the suggestion feeling harsh. That seems petty. It's smart, he reassured me. You don't want to deal with a financial disaster later. He was right. This wasn't about being petty, but about being proactive. Julia had never been frugal, and there was nothing preventing her from depleting our accounts out of spite. I pulled out my phone and began taking notes, my heart racing as I contemplated the steps ahead. What's next? I asked, eager to regain control over my life. Ryan tapped his pen against a notebook, pondering my situation. Are you getting your own place or staying here for now? I hesitated, the thought of finding a new place feeling overwhelming. I don't want to overstay my welcome, but finding a new place might be tough, especially with my finances post-divorce. Ryan nodded, supportive but firm. Stay here for now, but start looking. I made a note, the urgency of my situation settling in. I'll need clothes, documents, essentials, things I can't leave behind. Ryan continued to guide me. You have the lawyers meeting this afternoon, right? I sighed, the weight of the day's events pressing down on me. Yeah, but I have no idea what to ask. He leaned in closer, his eyes serious. The more you understand about divorce procedures, restraining orders, and asset protection, the better. He was right. This was about taking control of a situation that had spiraled out of my hands. What about work? He asked. Are you taking time off? I hesitated, knowing my job provided stability. But I wasn't ready to walk in and pretend nothing had changed. I'll take a few days, maybe not this week. Ryan clapped me on the back, the gesture both comforting and encouraging. You're doing great, man. This is the hardest part, but you're handling it. The rest of the morning blurred into a whirlwind of emails and phone calls. I changed passwords, canceled shared credit cards, and created a new bank account, each step feeling like a reclaiming of my autonomy.